Today, the Senate will vote on a bill that will add $1.5 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. This is a large amount of money and something that we should be very wary of. This is in addition to what we were already running debt of nearly $1 trillion. So we're adding a couple hundred extra billion dollars a year to a budget and a country and a Congress that had already recklessly let spending get out of control. The bill is nearly 700 pages. It was given to us at midnight last night, and I would venture to say no one has read the bill. No one can thoroughly digest a 700-page bill overnight, and I do think that it does things that we really ought to talk about and how we should pay for them. One of the things this bill does is it's going to add $500 billion in spending over a 2-year period. This bill increases spending 21%. Does that sound like a large amount? Anybody at home getting a bonus or an increase in your paycheck of 21%? And yet your government's going to spend 21% more without really having a full debate, without having amendments. The exchange you just watched was me asking to have a 15-minute vote. I've been asking all day. I've been asking all week for it. We could have literally had dozens of votes today, but we squabble because people don't want to be put on the spot. So the reason I'm here tonight is to put people on the spot. I want people to feel uncomfortable. I want them to have to answer people at home who said, how come you were against President Obama's deficits, and then how come you're for Republican deficits? Isn't that the very definition of intellectual dishonesty? If you were against President Obama's deficits and now you're for the Republican deficits, isn't that the very definition of hypocrisy? People need to be made aware. Your senators need to answer people from home, and they need to answer this debate. We should have a full-throated debate. My amendment says this simply: we should obey the budget caps. What are budget caps? These are limits we placed on spending, both military and non-military. We placed them in 2011, and guess what? For a year or two, government actually shrunk. But now government's taking off, and this new stimulus of deficit spending will be as big as President Obama's stimulus. Don't you remember when Republicans howled to high heaven that President Obama was spending us into the gutter, spending us into oblivion? And now Republicans are doing the same thing. And so I ask the question, whose fault is it? Republicans? Yes. Whose fault is it? Democrats? Yes, it's both parties' fault. You realize that this is the secret of Washington. The dirty little secret is the Republicans are loudly clamoring for more military spending, but they can't get it unless they give the Democrats welfare spending. So they raise all the spending. It's a compromise in the wrong direction. We should be compromising in the direction of going towards spending only what comes in. And yet this goes on and on and on. You will hear people say, well, the military is hollowed out. We have not enough money for our military. And yet we doubled the amount of money we spend on the military since 9/11/2001. Look, I have family members in the military. I have retired members of the military in my family, and I care very deeply about our soldiers. In fact, you know what I would do? I'd bring them all home from Afghanistan. The war is won. People are talking about making a parade. Declare victory in Afghanistan, bring them home and have a parade, and give them all a raise. And yet, we go on and on and on, finding new wars to fight that make no sense, where we have no idea who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, that are so murky that halfway through the war we sometimes change sides, or the people we support change sides. So we're at war in Afghanistan after 16 years. Costs $50 billion a year. So they need more money for the military because we're in too many places for too long. We have no exact mission of why we're there, and it is not a militarily winnable situation in Afghanistan. There will never be a victory in Afghanistan. There may be a negotiated settlement, and they may flee when we come, but as soon as we leave, they come back. Are we to be there forever? For the umpteenth time, Congress is going to exceed their budget caps. We had something passed back in 2010. It was called PayGo. It was supposed to say if you're going to pay new money, you had to go find an offset somewhere else. You could only pay as you go. It was sort of like a family would think about it. If you're going to spend some more money, you either got to raise your income or you got to save some money. You know how many times we've evaded it since 2010? 30 some odd times. When I try to get them to pay attention to their own rules, like 3 or 4 people will vote to pay attention to the rules. We are in a terrible state as a country. $20 trillion in debt is bigger than our entire economy. You wonder why the stock market is jittery? Well, one of the reasons is we do not have the capacity to continue to fund a government like this. We've been funding it with phony interest rates that are concocted and given to us by the Federal Reserve, but they aren't real. What if interest rates become real again? Anybody remember when interest rates were 5, 10, 15? I remember as a teenager them being 19 or 20%. But historically, they've often been at least 5. You know what happens to the government when our interest rate goes to 5 and they have to borrow for Social Security and Medicare and all the other stuff we do? There'll be a catastrophe in this country. Already, interest rates are ticking up. Stock market is jittery. If you ask a question why, maybe it has something to do with the irresponsibility of Congress spending money that we don't have. So the bill's going to exceed the budget caps by $296 billion. And that's not counting the money they don't count. All right, so these people are really, really clever. Imagine them running their fingers together and saying, how can we hide stuff from the American people? How can we evade the spending caps so we can be even more irresponsible than we appear? So 296 is the official number, about $300 billion over 2 years that will be in excess of the budget caps. But there's another $160 billion that's stuck into something called an overseas contingency fund. The budget caps don't apply there. So we're $300 billion for 2 years over the budget caps. And then we're another $160 billion over the caps, but they just don't count it. They act as if it doesn't matter. We're just not going to count it. And then we come to catastrophes. And you might say to yourself, well, I have great sympathy for those people's houses were flooded in Texas and Florida. I do. My sister's house was flooded in Houston or near Houston. And so I have great compassion. But even for my family, I can't take the money from you or borrow it for the next generation. Just say, hey, here's a pot of money. Go rebuild your house. We should do it in a responsible fashion. We've already, I think, spent 30 some odd billion on emergency relief for the hurricanes. There's another 90 billion. But you know what I've said? Instead of just plunking 90 billion down or actually printing it over at the Federal Reserve or borrowing it, instead of just doing that, why don't we take the 90 billion from somewhere in the budget that it shouldn't be? People come to me all the time, they want something from government. I say, well, if you want something from government, tell me where to take it from, because I'm not going to borrow anymore. We should take it from some other place in the budget. Where do you get the 90 billion from? So I've had some suggestions, and you know how many votes they get? About 10 or 15 people will vote with me. I say, well, you know what, let's not send it to Pakistan this year. They burn our flag. They put Christians in jail. They put the guy in jail, a Dr. Afridi, who helped us to find bin Laden. We finally got bin Laden. He'd been living high on the hog in the middle of a town, a mile or two from a military academy. Everybody probably knew he was there in the Pakistani government, and he lived uninterrupted. We finally got him when a guy named Dr. Shakil Afridi gave us information. You know what Pakistan did to this doctor? He's in jail for 33 years. You know what they did with a Christian by the name of Asia Bibi? Pakistan has her on death row. She went to the well in a small village to draw water. And as she was drawing water, the women of the village began stoning her and beating her with sticks as she lay on the ground bleeding, and everybody watched and gawked as she lay on the ground bleeding. She was crying out for help when the police finally arrived, and she thought she'd been saved, only to be arrested for being a Christian. And yet we've given $33 billion to Pakistan over the last decade. Good money after bad. Almost everybody up here loves it. They just want more of your money to go to Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, China, you name it. They'll send your money anywhere. And we've got a country that needs it here. Instead of nation building abroad, why don't we build our country here at home? Why don't we do some nation building here at home? So we have $90 billion that we need for emergency relief. Even as conservative as I am, I would say we can probably find that. We're a great rich country. We can probably rebuild, and the government can be part of that. But you know what? Why don't we quit sending it to Pakistan? Why don't we quit sending it to countries who burn our flag and chant death to America? Why don't we keep that money here at home? Why don't we say to the government writ large that they have to spend a little bit less? Anybody ever had less money this year than you had last? Anybody better having a 1% pay cut? You deal with it. That's what government needs, a 1% pay cut. If you take a 1% pay cut across the board, you have more than enough money to actually pay for the disaster relief. But nobody's going to do that because they're fiscally irresponsible. Who are they? Republicans. Who are they? Democrats. Who are they? Virtually the whole body is careless and reckless with your money. So the money will not be offset by cuts anywhere. The money will be added to the debt, and there will be a day of reckoning. What's the day of reckoning? The day of reckoning may well be the collapse of the stock market. The day of reckoning may be the collapse of the dollar. When it comes, I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you it has happened repeatedly in history when countries ruin their currency, when countries become profligate spenders, when countries begin to believe that debt does not matter. That's what this bill is about. But here's the confusion. Some at home will say, we just want them to cooperate. If they would just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, everything would be fine. Well, guess what? That's what you've got. You saw both of the leadership of both sides opposing me because they are now clasped hand in hand. Everybody's getting what they want. Everybody's getting more spending. The military, the right's getting more military spending. The left is getting more welfare spending. And you're getting stuck with a bill. Not even technically you. It's the next generation being stuck with the bill. Your grandkids are being stuck with the bill. But mark my words, the stock market is jittery. The bond market is jittery. There is an undercurrent of unease amidst this euphoria you've seen in the stock market. A country cannot go on forever spending money this way. And what you're seeing is recklessness trying to be passed off as bipartisanship. So we've gotten together, they're all holding hands, and there's only one bad guy standing in the way. One guy's going to keep us here till 3 in the morning. Well, you know what? I think the country's worth a debate till 3 in the morning, frankly. I think it is worth a debate on whether or not we should borrow $1 million a minute. I've been saying that for a few years. We borrow $1 million a minute because I think it really brings it home. And we were talking about with my staff today, and they say, you know, it's almost $2 million a minute now. $2 million a minute. Can you imagine? And this is exploding. This deficit is exploding, and there isn't the alarm you should see. But guess what? Every one of these people, you'll see them come home to your state. You'll see them come home, and they'll tell you how earnest they are, and how the deficit is bad, and big government spending is bad, and we have to reduce waste. It's dishonest. They're not doing anything about the waste. The waste has been out there for probably half a century or more. Nothing's been done in the last 40 years for one precise reason. There is no oversight. You realize what they are passing is all of the money glommed together in one bill. No one will read the bill. No one knows what's in it, and there is no reform in the bill. That I can say with absolute certitude. No one will read it, no reform, nothing gets better, the debt will grow. When the Democrats are in power, Republicans appear to be the conservative party. But when Republicans are in power, it seems there is no conservative party. You see, opposition seems to bring people together, and they know what they're not for, but then they get in power and they decide, we're just going to spend that money too. We're going to send that money to our friends this time. The hypocrisy hangs in the air and chokes anyone with a sense of decency or intellectual honesty. The right cries out, our military is hollowed out, even though military spending has more than doubled since 2001. The left is no better. Democrats don't oppose the military money as long as they can get some for themselves, as long as they can get some for their pet causes. The dirty little secret is that by and large, both parties don't care about the debt. The spending bill is 700 pages. and there will be no amendments. The debate, although it's somewhat inside baseball that we're having here, is over me having a 15-minute debate. And they say, woe is me, if you get one, everybody will want an amendment. Well, guess that would be called debate. That would be called an open process. That would be called concern for your country, enough to take a few minutes. And they're like, but it's Thursday and we like to be on vacation on Fridays. And so they clamor, but we've been sitting around all day. It's not like we've had 100 amendments today and we're all worn out, we can't do one more. We're going to have 0 amendments. 0, goose egg, no amendments. So it's a binary choice. They love that word. It's a binary choice. Take it or leave it. Well, you know what? I'm going to leave it. I didn't come up here for this. I didn't leave my family throughout the week and travel up here to be a part of something that is so much inertia and so much status quo that they're not leading the country. They're just following along, and it's a big ball rolling down the hill, grabbing up your dollars as the boulder rolls down the hill, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it's going to crush us. But nobody's got the guts to stand up and say no.